So today is your first class in neuro-ophthalmology. So I'll be starting with anatomy of optic nerve, anatomy of visual pathway, lesions of visual pathway, and pupillary pathway. Optic nerve is the second cranial nerve. It is sensory and part of the visual axis. It starts from optic disc, extends to optic chiasma where the two optic nerves meet. It is backward continuation. Can you hear me now? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It starts from optic disc, extends to optic chiasma where two nerves meet. It is backward continuation of retinal nerve fibers, which consists of the axons originating from the ganglion cells. It is not a peripheral nerve, but a white matter of tract of central nervous system. And there are two optic nerves, each connecting the retina within each globe to the target areas within the brain. Now coming to structure of nerve, it contains about 1.2 million myelinated fibers. About 53% crosses an optic chiasma. And nasal fibers cross while the temporal fibers enter the optic tract of the same side to reach the lateral geniculate nucleus. It lacks neurulema, so it's unable to regenerate. Now coming to parts of optic nerve, intraocular portion, which is about 1 mm. This intraocular portion of the optic nerve is the optic disc, which we see through ophthalmoscope. And it is about 1 mm in length. Then comes intraorbital portion, which is located within muscle cone. It is 25 mm in length. Intracanicular portion is located within optic canal, which is 5 mm. And intracranial portion, it ends at the optic chiasma, which is about 10 mm. Now coming to intraocular part, it passes through the sclera, converting it into a sieve-like structure, which is called as lamina cribosa. Then it passes through sclera, choroid, and then finally appears inside the eye as optic disc. Now lamina cribosa, the nerve fibers forming the optic nerve exit the eye posteriorly through a hole in the sclera that is occupied by a mesh-like structure called the lamina cribosa. It is formed by a multi-layered network of collagen fibers that insert into the scleral canal wall. The nerve fibers that comprise the optic nerve run through the pores formed by these collagen beams. It extends from back of the eyeball to optic foramina, and it is about 25 to 30 mm in length. So the longest part of the optic nerve is intraorbital part. Sometimes it may come in MCQ also, that question like what is the length of the intraorbital part of the optic nerve. So you should know the length of each part of the optic nerve. And the distance line from back of the globe to optic canal is much less, with relative excess of the optic nerve being necessary for free movement of globe during eye movement. So at the intraorbital part of the optic nerves, it is in the S shape. So it helps in the free movement of the globe during eye movement. And here it travels within the cone formed by 4 recti muscles near the optic foramina. So tumors within the cone are most common source of compression of optic nerve or compressive optic neuropathy. So if there is any tumor in the muscle cone, then it compresses the optic nerve, leading to compressive optic neuropathy. And enlargement of the muscles, particularly inferior rectus, medial rectus, in case of Graves' ophthalmopathy, may also lead to compressive optic neuropathy. That means the involvement of the intraorbital part of the optic nerves in case of Graves' ophthalmopathy leads to optic neuropathy. Then posteriorly near the optic foramina, it is closely surrounded by the annulus of gene and origin of 4 recti muscles. Some fibers of the superior rectum muscles are adherent to its sheath and accounts for the painful ocular movement seen in retrobulbar neuritis. Anteriorly, the nerve is separated from the ocular muscles by the orbital fat. And it is crossed superiorly by ophthalmic artery from lateral to medial side, superior ophthalmic vein, nasociliary nerve, medial to lateral side, inferiorly by nerve to medial rectus. At the apex, ciliary ganglion lies between optic nerve and lateral rectus, and near eyeball there's retroocular fat. Now next is intracanalicular part. It is about 5 mm in length. Sphenoid and posterior ethmoid sinus lie medially and separated by thin bony lamina, which accounts for optic neuritis following sinus infection. So if there is sinus infection, then because of the involvement of the intracannular part of the optic nerve, it leads to optic neuritis. And within the canal and immediately posterior to canal, meningeal tissue is adjacent to optic nerve. So benign tumors of meninges like meningioma are common cause of compressive optic neuropathy in these locations. And inferior laterally related to ophthalmic artery. And it extends from the posterior end of optic foramen to the anterior lateral angle of the optic chiasma. It is about 8 to 9 mm in length. It lies above the cavernous sinus. So the intracanalicular part of the optic nerve is about 8 to 9 mm, and it lies above the cavernous sinus, and it is the posterior end of the optic foramen to anterolateral angle of optic chiasma. So there it ends. Now optic chiasma, chiasma means crossroad. Here the nasal fiber crosses, but the temporal fibers do not cross, but they remain ipsilateral. The percentage of the fibers that cross versus do not cross is about 53:47. Optic chiasma is flat and quadrangular in shape. It is 12 mm horizontally and 8 mm anteroposteriorly. It lies over tuberculum and diaphragm sella. It is approximately 10 mm between the inferior part of the nerve and superior part of the pituitary. So tumors of the pituitary which enlarge enough to compress chiasma may cause compressive optic neuropathy. So if there is any, this is the applied anatomy. So if there is a tumor of the pituitary gland, then it enlarge and compress the chiasma, leading to optic neuropathy, compressive optic neuropathy. Now optic tracts. These are cylindrical bundles of optic nerve fiber running outward and backward from the posterior lateral aspect of the optic chiasma. Each optic tract consists of fibers from the temporal half of the retina of the same eye and the nasal half of the opposite eye. Posteriorly, each optic tract ends in the lateral geniculate body. The pupillary fibers passes onto the pretector nucleus in the midbrain through the superior brachium, and the some fibers they end in the superior colliculus. Now lateral genicular bodies. These are oval structures situated at the posterior termination of the optic tract. Each geniculate body consists of 6 layers of neurons alternating with white matter, and the fibers of second order neurons coming via optic tracts relay in these neurons. The fibers from the optic radiation, the fibers from the lateral geniculate body from the genitocalculin tracts, which ends in visual area of the cerebral cortex. And these consist of the axons of third order. Now visual cortex, it is located on the medial aspect of the occipital lobe, above and below the calcarent fissure. It is subdivided into the sensory area that receives the fiber of the radiation and the surrounding visuopsychic area, that is peristrial area 18 and 19. Now coming to blood supply of optic nerve. It varies from one segment to another. Like the optic nerve head is again divided into retrolaminar, laminar and prelaminar portion. So the retrolaminar portion of the optic nerve head is supplied mainly by pile vessels and short posterior ciliary artery, central retinal and septal arteries, and sometimes recurrent choroidal arteries. Laminar portion is supplied by short posterior ciliary artery and branches of circle of Haller and Gene. Prelaminar portion is supplied by short posterior ciliary artery, recurrent choroidal arteries and chorioretinal arteries if present. Then intraorbital portion is supplied proximally by pile vessels, neighboring branches of ophthalmic artery, and distally by intraneural branches of central retinal artery, pile vessels, and branches of ophthalmic artery. The intracanalicula part is supplied by ophthalmic artery, and intracranial part is supplied by both internal carotid artery and ophthalmic artery. So the blood supply of optic nerve varies from segment to segment, that you should know. Now venous drainage is by central retinal vein and to less extent by pile venous system. Both systems drain into ophthalmic venous system in orbit and less commonly directly into cavernous sinus. Now visual pathway. This visual pathway consists of optic nerve, optic chiasma, optic tract, lateral geniculate body, optic radiation, and visual cortex. So here you can see the fibers from the, this is the nasal and this is the temporal. So this is optic nerve and this is the optic chiasma. Then comes optic tract, then lateral geniculate body. This is the optic radiation and which ends in visual cortex. So this is the visual pathway. So here you can see the fibers from the nasal half, they are crossed at the optic chiasma, whereas from the temporal side, they goes in the ipsilateral side, they do not cross. Lesion of visual pathway. Lesions of the optic nerve is characterized by marked loss of vision or complete blindness on the affected side associated with abolition of the direct light reflex on the ipsilateral side and consensual on the contralateral side. But the accommodation reflex is present. The common causes of optic nerve lesions are optic atrophy, traumatic avulsion of the optic nerve, indirect optic neuropathy, and optic neuritis. And lesions to proximal part of the optic nerve. Features of such lesions are ipsilateral blindness, contralateral hemianopia, abolition of direct light reflex on the affected side, and consensual on the contralateral side, and near reflex is intact. And the central lesions of the optic chiasma is characterized by bitemporal hemianopia. So if there's lesion in the central part of the chiasma, then it leads to bitemporal hemianopia as the nasal fibers are crossed at the chiasma. So there will be loss of temporal vision and bitemporal hemianopic paralysis of pupillary reflex. This leads to partial descending optic atrophy. And the causes of central chiasmal lesion may be suprasellar aneurysm, tumor of pituitary gland, craniopharyngioma, suprasellar meningioma, glioma of third ventricle dilatation due to obstructive hydrocephalus. And lateral chiasmal lesions are characterized by binasal hemianopia associated with binasal hemianopic paralysis of the pupillary reflex. And the common causes of such lesions are distension of third ventricle causing pressure on each side of the chiasma, atheroma of carotids or posterior communicating arteries. And now lesions of the optic tract are characterized by incongruous homonymous hemianopia associated with contralateral hemianopic pupillary reactions, that is Wernicke's reaction. These lesions usually lead to partial descending optic atrophy and may be associated with contralateral thought nerve paralysis and ipsilateral hemiplegia. Common causes of optic tract lesions are syphilitic meningitis, gamma tuberculosis, tumors of optic thalamus, aneurysm of superior cerebral or posterior cerebral artery. Lesions of lateral geniculate body leads to homonymous hemianopia with sparing of pupillary reflexes and may end in partial optic atrophy. Lesions of optic radiation, their feature depends upon the site of the lesion. So involvement of total optic radiations produce complete homonymous hemianopia, sometimes sparing the macula, and inferior quadrantic hemianopia means pie on the floor. It occurs in lesions of parietal lobe that contains the superior fibers of optic radiations. And superior quadrantic hemianopia, that is pie in the sky, it may occur following lesion of the temporal lobe containing inferior fibers of optic radiations. Pupillary reaction are normal as the fibers of the light reflex leave the optic tract to synapse in the superior colliculus. Lesions of optic radiations do not produce optic atrophy as the second order neurons synapse in the lateral geniculate body. And the common lesions of these optic radiations include vascular occlusion, primary and secondary tumors, and trauma. Now, lesion of the visual cortex leads to concreous homonymous hemianopia, usually sparing the macula, which is a feature of occlusion of posterior cerebral artery, supplying the antepart of occipital cortex. The concreous homonymous macular defect occurs in lesion of the tip of the occipital cortex following head injury or gunshot injuries. Pupillary light reflexes are normal and optic atrophy does not occur following visual cortex lesion. So this is the diagram showing what type of features will occur if there is a lesion in the visual pathway. So if the whole optic nerve is involved, then there will be total blindness. And if the nasal side is involved, then there will be loss in the temporal field. So this is this temporal. So this is bitemporal hemianopia. This is binasal hemianopia. So one side of nasal side is affected and another is temporal. So this homonymous hemianopia. This is pie in the sky. This is pie in the floor. This is nasal side and this is temporal side. So homonymous hemianopia, and this is with homonymous hemianopia with sparing of the macular region. So you should know what kind of vision defect will be there if there is lesion in the certain part of the visual pathway. Now coming to pupillary reflex, there are light reflex, near reflex, and psychosensory reflex. But only we in this MBBS syllabus, light reflexes required. So I'll be focusing on light reflex only. This is very important in practical as well as in theory aspect, pupillary pathway. So what happens in pupillary pathways? The afferent fibers, it extends from retina to pretectal nucleus in the midbrain, and the fibers from the nasal retina decussate while the fibers from the temporal retina remain uncrossed, same like in visual pathway, okay, and travel along the optic tract and terminate in the pretectal nucleus. Then this internuncial fibers connect each pretectal nucleus with Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So from this internuncial fibers, the pathway differs from visual pathway. Up to pretectal nucleus is same like visual pathway, but from this internuncial fibers, the pupillary pathway is different. So because of this internuncial fibers, there is consensual light reflex. That means when the light is shown in one eye, then there will be constriction of pupil in the another eye. So the reason for that is because of this internuncial fibers. That is the fibers from each pretectal nucleus, like they decussate in the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. And then comes efferent pathway, which consists of fibers of sympathetic fibers from Edinger. They goes from Edinger Westphal nucleus and travel along the third cranial nerve. And from there, preganglionic fibers enter the inferior division of third nerve and via nerve to inferior oblique reach the ciliary ganglion. So the postganglionic fibers travel along the short ciliary nerves to innervate the sphincter pupillae and then the pupil constrict. So this is the pupillary pathway. So you should practice this diagram also. Diagram of pupillary pathway, okay? So here you can see the fibers are tricuspid at the optic chiasma from the nasal side, whereas the temporal side fibers are uncrossed and they goes to pretectal nucleus. And from this internuncial fibers, some of the fibers go to the same Edinger-Westphal nucleus and some goes to the contralateral Edinger-Westphal nucleus, and through third cranial nerves they reach the ciliary ganglion, and from here through short ciliary nerves it innervates the sphincter pupillary muscles, and because of this there is constriction of pupil. Now coming to abnormalities of pupillary reactions. There may be ameretic light reflex, Wernicke's hemianoptic pupil, Marcus-Cohn pupil, Argyll-Robertson pupil, and Addis-Tonic pupil. So I'll be going in detail in this among this abnormal reaction. Only I'll covering Marcus-Cohn pupil. This is very important. It is also known as RAPT, that is relative afferent pupillary defect. So it is caused by incomplete optic nerve lesions or severe retinal diseases. So if there is lesion in optic nerve or in retina, then RAPT will be positive. What happens here is paradoxical dilatation of pupil in response to light occurs because the dilatation produced by withdrawing the light from the normal eye outweighs the constriction produced by stimulating the abnormal eye. So when we focus the light on the pupil, we see that the pupil keeps on dilating. And this is tested by swinging light test. What happens in a normal swinging light test, there is no RAPT. If there's no RAPT, then the pupil of both eye constrict equally, regardless of which eye is stimulated by the light. But in case of abnormal swinging light test, that is positive RAPT, there will be less pupil constriction in the eye with retina or optic nerve diseases. So it looks like dilatation of pupil. Actually, there will be less constriction of pupil in the affected eye. Okay. So this is the picture. In case of normal eye, there will be constriction of pupil when the light is swinging from one eye to another. But in case of positive RAPT of eye, then there will be no constriction of pupil, so it looks like dilatation of pupil. So, I don't know whether this video will work or not. Okay, I think now you are clear with Marcus Cone people, how to do swinging light test. So these are the causes of RAPD, which was already shown in video. Optic neuritis, ischemic optic disease, retinal disease, advanced glaucoma, direct optic nerve damage, retinal detachment, severe macular degeneration. So if there is any lesions in retina or optic nerve, it leads to RAPD. So I think this is my last slide, and with this I end my presentation. Thank you.